Trade disputes and tariffs have long been a significant part of international trade, especially when it comes to the United States, which maintains extensive trade relationships with countries around the globe. As tariffs increase on certain goods, the price and competitiveness of U.S. exports can be drastically affected. This video highlights the top 10 U.S. export goods that have been most impacted by ongoing tariff disputes, focusing on the economic consequences for U.S. businesses and global markets. These goods span a variety of industries, from agriculture to technology, and their affected markets are key to understanding the broader implications of trade tensions. 1. Soybeans. Soybeans are one of the most prominent U.S. export commodities that have been severely impacted by tariff disputes, particularly with China. The 2018 trade war between the U.S. and China saw China impose tariffs on U.S. soybeans, which led to a dramatic drop in U.S. exports to this key market. While there have been efforts to resolve this issue, China's tariffs on U.S. soybeans have still been a major concern for American farmers, particularly in the Midwest, which relies heavily on soybean exports. The disruption in the soybean supply chain has led U.S. farmers to seek new markets, though the impact remains felt. 2. Automobiles. Automobiles are another crucial U.S. export that has been influenced by tariff disputes, especially in relation to the European Union and China. The Trump administration's imposition of tariffs on steel and aluminum led to retaliatory tariffs from the EU and China, affecting the pricing and competitiveness of U.S. vehicles abroad. In addition, the U.S. has levied tariffs on foreign-made cars, which has complicated trade relationships with key automotive partners like Japan and South Korea. This has led to a dip in U.S. auto exports, as the cost of U.S. vehicles becomes less competitive in foreign markets. 3. Aircraft. The aerospace industry, which is home to major U.S. companies like Boeing, is another area where tariffs have had a notable impact. Tariff disputes with the European Union and China have disrupted the global supply chain for aircraft parts, leading to higher costs for U.S. exports. The EU, in particular, has imposed tariffs on Boeing aircraft as part of its long-standing dispute with the U.S. over subsidies to Airbus. The tariff tensions have resulted in a decline in the competitiveness of U.S.-made aircraft in some international markets, affecting both sales and deliveries. 4. Electronics and semiconductors. The electronics and semiconductor industry in the U.S. is integral to the global tech supply chain, and tariff disputes, particularly with China, have affected the export of these goods. China's retaliatory tariffs on U.S. semiconductors have hurt American tech companies that rely on Chinese manufacturing and markets for their products. Additionally, the U.S. has imposed restrictions on the export of advanced semiconductor technology to China, which has disrupted trade in this vital sector. As a result, U.S. semiconductor companies are facing challenges in maintaining their market share in global markets like Asia and Europe. 5. Machinery. Industrial machinery, including heavy equipment used in construction and manufacturing, is a significant U.S. export. However, tariff disputes have increased costs for buyers in countries that import U.S. machinery. For instance, China has imposed tariffs on U.S. industrial equipment as part of the ongoing trade war, reducing demand for these products. Similarly, tariffs between the U.S. and the European Union have led to higher costs for European buyers of U.S. machinery, affecting export volumes. The trade tensions have pushed U.S. manufacturers to look for new markets, but the impact on their bottom line remains substantial. 6. Agricultural products, other than soybeans. In addition to soybeans, other U.S. agricultural exports, such as pork, beef, and dairy, have been significantly affected by tariff disputes. Countries like China, Mexico, and the EU have placed tariffs on U.S. agricultural products in response to U.S. tariffs on their goods. For example, China imposed tariffs on U.S. pork, which has had a direct impact on U.S. pork producers who relied heavily on the Chinese market. Similarly, retaliatory tariffs from the EU and Mexico have affected exports of U.S. beef and dairy products. These agricultural exports, which are vital for American farmers, have seen reduced demand in key international markets due to tariff hikes. 7. Steel and aluminum. Steel and aluminum, essential materials for manufacturing and construction, have been at the center of many tariff disputes, particularly with China, the EU, and Canada. The U.S. imposed tariffs on imported steel and aluminum to protect domestic producers, which led to retaliatory tariffs from these countries on U.S. products. While the tariffs were intended to protect American industries, they have made U.S. steel and aluminum less competitive globally, affecting exports to key markets. U.S. steelmakers are facing a double-edged sword. Tariffs on imports have increased domestic production costs, while tariffs on exports have reduced the demand for U.S. metal products abroad. 8. Pharmaceuticals. The pharmaceutical industry, which is a major U.S. export sector, has been affected by trade tensions, particularly with China and the European Union. Both countries have imposed tariffs on U.S. drugs and medical devices, which have raised prices for foreign consumers and limited the competitiveness of U.S. pharmaceuticals in these markets. Tariffs on U.S. exports of drugs and medical devices have forced American companies to explore alternative markets and rethink pricing strategies to maintain their market share globally. 9. Chemicals. Chemicals, including products used in agriculture, manufacturing, and pharmaceuticals, are another important U.S. export. However, the imposition of tariffs between the U.S. and China, as well as the EU, has increased costs for foreign buyers, leading to reduced demand for U.S. chemicals. The U.S. chemical industry is highly integrated into the global supply chain, and tariff disputes have disrupted trade flows. Additionally, retaliatory tariffs on chemical products have made U.S. chemical goods more expensive in markets like Asia and Europe, contributing to a decline in exports in recent years. 10. Wine and spirits. The U.S. wine and spirits industry, particularly in regions like California, has also been impacted by tariff disputes. The European Union, as part of its response to U.S. tariffs on European goods, imposed tariffs on American wine and spirits, which raised the cost of these products for European consumers. Similarly, retaliatory tariffs from other countries, including China, have affected U.S. alcohol exports. The U.S. wine industry has seen reduced demand in key international markets, and producers have been forced to explore new export opportunities. Tariff disputes have far-reaching consequences on U.S. export goods, affecting everything from agriculture to technology to industrial machinery. While some industries have managed to adjust to these challenges by diversifying their markets, many others are still grappling with the effects of higher costs and reduced demand in foreign markets. As trade tensions continue to evolve, it remains to be seen how U.S. exporters will adapt and navigate these challenges. One thing is clear: tariff disputes have reshaped the global trade landscape, making it essential for U.S. businesses to stay informed about evolving trade policies and seek alternative strategies to maintain their competitive edge in global markets.